I want to look at some basic tenets of Ìwà Pẹ. Basically, where does it come from? The foundation of it, which I said before, is the Odu Ifá. I'm going to give this, disclaimer right now. I'm going to go through kind of a really brief summary over each of the major Odu and kind of what we can extract from there as far as the foundational tenet of Ìwà Pẹ that applies to that particular Odu. The Odu is so vast as we will be here for all day, all week, month, even so. If I went through every aspect of it, it's not even possible. And even so, again, the Odu is going to apply to you at a particular moment when you get a reading. So you could get a reading, you could get the same Odu as another person. However, your taboos or your warnings that come out of that Odu at the same time that another person gets that Odu could be very, very different. So you want to be mindful of that as well. Okay. So, like when it comes to the notion of coming into the earth, part of Ìwà Pẹ, a huge part of Ìwà Pẹ, is adhering to your destiny calling. That's so important because, as I said before, balanced character is very heavily dependent on your individual destiny. Now, obviously, you're going to operate in honesty and integrity. Maintaining your taboos is so important for you. And again, going back to that notion, something could be very much so benign, seem benign in the world, but it could actually be detrimental for you. For instance, you may have a taboo to not eat a certain food, for instance, okra. And, the world says, oh, it's okay, right? Okra is a plant, it has medicinal properties, it's very good for you, especially depending on the way it's cooked, so forth and so on. And it could seem okay, but one person could actually eat some okra and suffer from severe food poisoning and even so transition because of it, because because consuming okra either at that time or even so from a permanent perspective could have been taboo for them. They weren't supposed to consume it. So this is why I harp so much on that notion of especially of personal taboos, because it's very important that you follow those. All right. So we also talking about, and I'm giving the Odu names in parentheses. I'm not gonna try to pronounce all of them. I know how to pronounce a lot of them, but I just don't feel like messing up a lot today because I already know Mercury's in retrograde, and that impacts our communication dynamic. So, but if you want to look these up in more depth, definitely, utilize that as a reference point. Being patient, and humble are so very, very paramount, especially not just all the time, but as far as you can, but also especially in times of transition when you're going through chaotic changes and uncertainty. Being patient, not rushing into things. Patience is like one of the most important principles. It is the most important principle because your destiny is all about kind of wait and see what's going on. You can have the insight and the information when you get Ifá divination for sure, but it still has to play out in its own time. That's why patience is so important, because a lot of times people do get Ifá readings and they get this really beautiful, exciting news and like this is going to happen for you. And it's great to be excited about it, but sometimes people get overly anxious because they hear this and it's like, I want it to happen right now. And sometimes they will do things to try to compel it to come into existence. And there are things that you can do to force things to happen. It's not good. It again is not operating within balanced character because you really want it to come when it is appropriate for you. Because if it comes before time, you're going to have challenges in the area, right? So, during times of uncertainty, chaos, transition, exercising patience, exercising humility, seeking truth, being reflective, right? Introspective. That is part of having balanced character. taking a good deep look at yourself, at your past behavior, at who you are, looking at yourself in the proverbial mirror, so to speak. All right. Allowing information to surface as it needs to through that aspect of you. So, yes, definitely being contemplative about yourself and who you are and where you've been and what you've done. That's part of balanced character, because through that notion you get an opportunity to know yourself much better. Okay. Adhering to sacred boundaries with patience and restraint when you're facing obstacles. So herein is the notion of obviously taboos when we're talking about sacred boundaries that are personal to you, taboos personal to you, but also taboos that are incremental to the community, to your family line, to society at large, right? So that means when you're going through things, don't just go and do anything to get it done or to make your way. You want to go through the proper steps of Ifa when you're having struggles, because in some cases, obviously, struggles are through curses and attacks and things like that. But sometimes you go through struggles because they're meant to strengthen you. Even those are still meant to strengthen you. Honoring your ancestral lineage and fulfilling your inherited duties and potential. This is so important, especially in today's world for the diaspora, in my opinion, because there's so many people who are not doing that because we've been told that our ancestors are demonic. And, if you mention to the average person in Christianity or other Abrahamic religions that don't believe in connecting with your ancestors in the way that we do, they will all the time say that's evil, that's wrong. And so a lot of people throughout the African diaspora are very much so disconnected from their ancestral lineage, and this is why we are experiencing so many challenges as a collective. But that is absolutely part of Iwa Pele, because you came from a specific lineage for a specific purpose. Okay, you inherited certain gifts, certain knowledge, certain strengths, certain challenges that you are meant to go through in order to strengthen yourself and your bloodline and to fulfill your destiny. Your whole entire purpose is linked to your destiny, even though you have to your divine purpose, even though you have your own individual destiny to fulfill, it is still linked to your lineage. That's why you came through the people that you came through, right? Even if it was difficult or chaotic, dysfunctional. I know a lot of us came through that. You might be like, well, what is the purpose of this? Well, you came to learn certain lessons. You came to get certain information, even so through those people, so that you could fulfill your destiny. There were so many lessons that you learned growing up, even if you had some of the most turbulent or difficult situations, even if you weren't even like raised around your family, like you were adopted or something like that, there are still lessons that you were meant to learn within that situation that you're supposed to carry forward in order to heal yourself and also to heal your bloodline. All right. Navigating unexpected changes and circumstances with being adaptable and resilient. So we talked about the patience aspect. You also have to be adaptable when you're going through changes. That's part of having balanced characters, not to just fold and be like, well, you know what? I'm, immovable. I'm not going to change. This is the way it is. And, I'm not going to do what I need to do to adapt and make sure that this situation works in out for me in the way it's supposed to work, because there are some things that may need to change in your life, in your circumstances. And you just hold on to the old way of being because you don't want to change. Another aspect of this is employing integrity, being accountable in your words. Such a very important part of balanced character is the way we speak and the way we communicate. When I say speak, I'm not just talking about verbally, right? In every aspect of the way we communicate, even the way we write, even those of y'all on social media who feel like you can say whatever to anybody and it doesn't count. No, all of it counts. So even when you know want to get behind the keyboard and get into your little wars with that, that counts, as well as words that you say to people behind people's back, gossiping, all that kind of stuff, betraying people. All of that matters because your words are so important. Even the words that you say to yourself and about yourself, the way you speak. If you constantly saying negative words, you're out of balance. If you're constantly saying, negative words about yourself, right, you're out of balance in that regard. So you have to be mindful of those dynamics as well. Endurance is so very important. Going through conflict, right, staying disciplined, controlling yourself, not compromising yourself whenever you're going through different things. Also, not retreating, right? Not retreating in the face of battles and like, I just give up. I'm not gonna move forward. Staying the course, being courageous, being persistent whenever you're going through. And if you notice, a lot of these things are about, right, going through challenges and facing difficulties, because that's the time that we need the most balance. There are also times, obviously, when we're facing good things, which I'm going to get to as well, where balance is critical. But a lot of times when we're dealing with the struggles and the challenges, that's when, we want to get upset, we want to fight, we want to get angry, we want to even sometimes do things to compel things to go our way, etc. So you want to be in balance then. Navigating hidden forces and unseen influences with spiritual discipline and vigilance. Understanding that everything is not what you see at face value. So you got to be able to navigate the things that are going on behind the scenes, things that you cannot always see. You have to be able to navigate that properly and remain disciplined and vigilant when you're going through those things. Not misusing your power. So hearing this is one of those times where you have the good things, you have the power or what have you, but you want to avoid being in a space of arrogance and pride and being reckless with the power, with the things that you have, because you do have the ability to um, impact change from a negative perspective when you have good things at your disposal, right? So manager or supervisor or what have you, still want to treat people well. You want to treat people fairly. Obviously, if you're in a political position, or it could even so be in a domestic situation. Right before I got on, I was strolling through Instagram and saw a video of this family in, forget where it was, but it was a Kenyan lady anyway. She was being beat by her employer for asking for her check, and they were being very, very rude and mean to her. And I was just like, it speaks to this dynamic that I was just getting ready to come online with and talk about, abusing. They were just totally abusing their power. They were in a position of wealth that they could hire her, and they should have been paying her, and she was 2 months rather delayed in receiving her pay. And when she asked for it, they beat her, so she was recording it. So I guess to present it as evidence or what have you. And you're not supposed to operate in that either, right? Because there are situations where you absolutely have it at your disposal to help other people, and you should not abuse that power. Managing blessings and abundance with humility, recognizing that prosperity requires wisdom and responsibility. This is important as well, right? So when you get money, you get something, of value, you get abundance. That's not that you just take it and be wasteful. You have to be a good steward, so to speak, of whatever you have. You need to make those resources last. You want to also make it last for the next generation over, if possible, depending on the amount, of course. So all of those dynamics are important as well when it comes to balanced character. You want to seek divine counsel, right? Guidance, so that you can have discernment and wisdom in life. That's part of balanced character. Don't just depend on your own understanding and your own knowledge base, thinking that you know it all. because that's egotistical. You want to go and get counsel from elders. You obviously want to get divine counsel from Ifa, because we practice a tradition that believes in divinatory insight. So, all of those notions are very important as well. Being generous and practicing reciprocity in your relationship, and again, in a balanced state, right? Not overgiving, but we do still want to be generous, but it needs to be within bounds. You need reciprocal relationships. That doesn't mean, one for one. Every time you do something for somebody, they must do the exact same thing for you. But there needs to be reciprocity in relationships. All right. And this goes for both ends, whether you are the person that's always receiving or you're the person that's always giving. It needs to be in balance. It should never be that one is always receiving in a situation and one is always giving, because it creates imbalance either way it goes. Okay. Exercising kindness. You do want to be kind. You do want to be nurturing in your relationships to invite divine favor. If you're always constantly arguing or bickering or fighting with someone, then that is a sign of imbalance, and you want to get back in balance, because you don't want to have these challenges in life that cause you to miss the mark, so to speak. And then, lastly, living in truth, moral integrity, and as you fulfill your destiny holistically, right? You want to operate in purity. These are holistically from the Odu, a general guide, as I said before. So this is not to be taken as like, this is all I have to do. No, it depends on your particular situation, but it gives you an overview of what is considered to be balanced within the Odu Ifá.